On today's episode of Claire Recreates, I am recreating something I've never had before. I am recreating honey buns. When I see it in the package, I was like, oh, it's just like a cinnamon roll. But it's not. I learned in my research that in fact it is fried. And then I was sort of like, this is a brilliant idea. It's like a cinnamon bun donut, which is a great idea. And it feels like very internet-y, even though this is like a much older thing. So then I was like, actually, that'd be kind of fun, and I'm excited to make it. They look enormous on the box. Oh, product enlarged to show detail. Okay, there you go. Definitely not actual size. They're much smaller than I thought they would be just based on the picture. It looks tasty. Like the glaze is kind of set. It's a nice thin coating. It smells like a donut with a ton of chemicals in it. There's some sort of like off aromas that I think are probably like preservatives. I don't really get any honey or cinnamon aromas at all. But it really does smell like donut. Let's take a closer look. It's very, very light for its size. The glaze is like a little tacky, so it's mostly set, but like, you know, still some moisture in there. There's kind of a top and a bottom. On the bottom, I see like a ring of cinnamon, or what I'm assuming is cinnamon. It looks like it's mostly glazed on the top, but the bottom has sort of some coating on it. It probably runs like on a conveyor belt under like a waterfall of glaze, and then some of it kind of like drips around the sides and catches along the bottom edge. So it's not separating so easily along the seams of the spiral, which is kind of telling me that like it doesn't have much of a filling. And like when you pull it apart at that spiral, it really doesn't pull apart. That's the little line of cinnamon or whatever the filling is. I keep saying cinnamon, I'm sure that's what it is. The crumb, not surprisingly, is very uniform. It's pretty tight. Let me just finally taste it. It's very, very tender. Mostly the flavor of the glaze, which is like confectioner sugar. Literally almost no honey flavor at all. I get no cinnamon. I really just get glazed flavor. Like it tastes like a glazed donut. Not a particularly good one, which, you know, it's like the thing about donuts is they're best fresh. So it's like, it tastes like a stale donut. Not that stale, but it's super light, it's super tender. The flavor is so flat and very, very sweet. Ingredients: enriched bleached flour, parentheses, wheat flour, barley malt, niacin, reduced iron, thiamine mononitrate, vitamin B1, riboflavin, vitamin B2, folic acid, close parentheses. Water, sugar, palm oil, dextrose, palm and soybean oils with TBHQ and citric acid to protect flavor. Yeast contains 2% or less of each of the following: cornstarch, mono and diglycerides, soy flour, non-fat dry milk, salt, dried eggs, leavening, parentheses, sodium acid, pyrophosphate, baking soda, close parentheses, wheat starch, datum, D-A-T-E-M, literally never heard of that, preservatives, parentheses, calcium propionate, sorbic acid, potassium sorbate, close parentheses, dried honey, soy lecithin, calcium carbonate, calcium stearoyl lactylate, agar, cinnamon, there we go, natural and artificial flavors, parentheses, contains lemon, close parentheses, citric acid, soybean oil, cocoa, enzymes, titanium dioxide, parentheses, color, ascorbic acid, calcium sulfate, hydrogenated soybean oil, calcium peroxide, annatto extract, parentheses color, turmeric extract, parentheses color. It's such a long list. The only thing I'm taking away from 2% or less list is that it lists dried honey and cinnamon. I'm not paying attention to any of like the chemicals because it's just not relevant. And basically it is a product made from flour, water, sugar, and other forms of fat. So in this case, palm oil and soybean oil and yeast. The cocoa was like listed very far down on the list. I don't understand the cocoa. It might be that it's part of the what's inside the swirl, but has like no, like lends no flavor. I'm ignoring the cocoa. I don't think that we need cocoa in here. So lengthwise, it's about 9 centimeters. Crosswise, about 7.5. I want to just sort of be able to anticipate like how big do I make them. The thickness is about 2 centimeters. Each kind of layer of dough is like between 1 and 1.5 centimeters, obviously after cooking. So one of the things that happens with cinnamon rolls is when you roll up dough and you cut it, you roll it with some tension to it. And so what happens as it rises is it expands, and sometimes you get a kind of like coning effect of the layers kind of puffing up. And that's not happened here at all. It's very, very flat. I mean, there's the bottom, which is almost entirely flat because it's resting on that. And then there's the top where like there is not, like the center of the spiral has not risen up out of the center at all, which to me tells me like it's not really rolled particularly tightly. It's like it's been glued together. So that's just something that I want to think about. Here is actually like the seam. I see it kind of dusting along the seam here, but there's like inside of it, it's almost totally undetectable. There's nothing in there almost. If that is indeed cinnamon, it is just like the most faint whisper of cinnamon. My first thought was like brioche, but I'm thinking actually that it's too rich, and what I really should prioritize is, in addition to like honey flavor and cinnamon flavor, is texture, like getting something really light. And so I'm thinking more like milk bread. Less enriched than brioche, but still like extremely, extremely light and tender. Definitely we need to start with the dough because that has to rise. So number 1 is dough and then rise. 2, form the buns, and then those are going to proof. And then 3 is going to be frying and glazing. I'm gonna combine this as one step because when you do glazed donuts, you really wanna glaze them hot. And I feel like it's gonna be really easy to introduce honey flavor in the glaze. I'm just gonna add honey to like a confectioner sugar kind of milk glaze. For the dough, I have some all-purpose flour and I have it divided because I'm gonna cook this little bit with the milk first, and then we're gonna add everything together. I'm gonna grab my mixer. I grabbed some honey, so in the recipe that I'm using, I'm gonna replace there's a little bit of sugar in the dough, and that helps to just like get the yeast going. It's kind of a flavor enhancer. I'm gonna replace some of it with honey. So I have that. I have a little cinnamon for the swirl, eggs, some salt, basic stuff for a kind of enriched yeast dough. So milk bread is a Japanese style, very, very like light enriched bread. And it uses this method of cooking some of the flour and the liquid that I believe was adopted from like a Chinese technique, but really has become so popular through Japanese milk bread. So I'm going to put my 3/4 cup of milk. I'm going to get that in my saucepan. At the moment, this is just on low. I'm going to increase the heat, but first I want to incorporate the flour. So I'm going to whisk the flour and kind of gradually add it just to prevent lumps into the liquid. I'm just using a small whisk. Again, you don't want any big lumps to form. So we're going to cook this into basically like a smooth paste. So I'm going to turn up the heat now. So it's starting to thicken. And here I have this mixture. I often describe it as like it'll look like smooth mashed potatoes. I'm going to scrape this mixture into the stand mixer. I have to let that cool, but I'm going to stir it so it happens quickly. I gave this several stirs over a few minutes and it's cooled down. It's maybe the tiniest bit warm, but we're gonna keep going. So now I'm gonna add my other ingredients for the dough. I have eggs. These are cold eggs. That's really important here. This is gonna help us maintain texture because this dough is mixed for such a long period of time. What ends up happening is it kind of warms up from the friction of the dough hook in the mixer. So it's nice to start with a cold ingredient to just kind of keep things from getting too warm because the warmth can kind of like just negatively affect the texture. So cold eggs, and the eggs are really the liquid plus the milk. Now this is 2 tablespoons of honey. Honey is such a really, really strong flavor. So you end up not needing a whole lot to impart honey flavor. It can really easily get, the honey can really easily get kind of overwhelming and like take over. Hold on. So I'm just using 2 tablespoons in the dough, and then there's going to be more in the glaze. When I get honey, I just like to get something like a raw, unfiltered honey. So I'm going to add butter to this dough, but I'm adding just a little bit of oil, which helps to just keep things kind of like supple. 2 tablespoons of just granulated sugar. Then this is kosher salt. Then I'm adding some instant yeast. And now I'm going to add the rest of my flour. I'm going to pop this in. We're going to mix this on low. And then when it kind of comes together, I'm going to increase to like medium low. You don't really want to go above that. It's like a nice, long, slow mix. So we're going to be here for a while. And then I'm going to add the butter. And then it has to mix after that even more. You can see it's like very, very sticky, but it's also very elastic. So I'm going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. We're going to add cold butter to this, and it's going to help to keep the temperature lower so it doesn't get too warm. Because what happens when it gets too warm is like it affects the gluten structure, and like the fat will start to ooze out, and you just don't want that. And then it doesn't have that more bready pull apart texture. So I'm going to add the butter in 2 additions. So let me get this going back on medium low, and I'm going to grab the butter. This is much less butter than I would be adding if I were making brioche. So I'm going to do half of it. And then when that is fully incorporated into the dough, I'm going to add the other half. And we're going to mix just until the dough is no longer sticky. And then we're going to let it rise. So this dough is done, just because it's been mixing long enough. I'll actually show you a little quick test. So if you grab a blob of dough and you start to slowly stretch it in all directions with your fingertips. See how the dough has stretched to this like super thin film without tearing? Well, it's about to tear. And the light will pass through. See that? So that means that we have lots of gluten development. So I'm just going to use a little bit of flour. And I'm going to gather it into a ball. And do a little slap and fold. This dough looks so good. See how smooth it is? And it's like super elastic. This looks great. So I'm going to get just a little flour over it. I like to use the bowl scraper to help me rotate the dough across the surface, and that helps to develop this tight kind of dome. So it's in this nice smooth ball. And now I'm going to get it back into the mixing bowl to rise. So I'm going to just give the bowl a little bit of flour. Dough's going to go back in, and I'm going to cover it. And this is going to sit at room temperature until, so here's the thing. This dough, so you can see how it's, wait, hold on. Just scrape down the hook. All right, so you can see that this dough is at room temp is really soft. So we are going to give this a little bit of a jump start on the rise at room temp, and then we're going to put it in the fridge because this dough is much, much easier to handle when it's cold. So I like to let it sit out at room temperature for like 30 to 60 minutes, where I start to see some growth. It's like already, you know, it'll sort of puff up a little bit and start to expand, and then it finishes in the fridge. So we'll transfer it to the fridge. Now here's the kind of lie I've been perpetrating so far this whole episode is this dough, because it likes a nice long slow rise. I made a batch last night.
Just on a hunch you did it.
On a hunch, sure. On a hunch I made this dough last night. So I'm gonna grab that one. It's already cold. So here's my thinking about the swirl. I'm gonna put cinnamon in it. I think the combination of honey and cinnamon, it's like that's what I want the flavor to be. So it's gonna be cinnamon inside the roll and honey in the dough and in the glaze. Now it's a really, really light dusting of cinnamon. I don't think that I'm going to add sugar to the swirl. Like normally it would just be like cinnamon sugar, just, you know, like cover it with some butter, cinnamon sugar. That would be if I was making a cinnamon roll. But there's a couple things I'm thinking about here. One is I don't really want to add sugar because the whole thing is, it's pretty, there's a lot of surface area and it gets coated in glaze. So I think I don't want to make it too sweet. The other thing is that the dough does not unroll easily, which I think is important, like, because during frying, I don't want that spiral to unravel. And so that it like really sticks together. And so I'm going to use actually just a little bit of water, something for the cinnamon to stick to. And also it is going to like help to glue the dough together when I roll it up. It sounds like a little austere, but with the glaze on top and the butter in it, like there's plenty of richness and sweetness from the other components. So really just this is about getting a little bit of cinnamon in there and creating a roll that's not going to come apart when I fry. So I'm going to grab the dough. I have some bench flour here and I have my rolling pin. The bowl was in the fridge at an angle to fit in there, so it rose like that. So I put this in the fridge after about an hour at room temp. I had grown maybe like 20% in volume, and it continued the rise overnight, so you can see like the difference in size. And because it's cold, the butter in there has firmed up, the dough has, like, the flour has further hydrated. It's now a very firm piece of dough. This is a dough that's much easier to work with when it's cold. And I have a piece of parchment paper here. I'm going to give it a little bit of flour. I'm gonna roll on the parchment paper. This is gonna help me create that spiral. So I want to put this down on the surface, smooth side down. And I do want to try to start to orient the dough in a more rectangular shape rather than round, because I want to get like a log of rolled up dough that's of even thickness from end to end. So I like to just kind of start to create that shape by pulling on the dough. I like to tug at it and kind of create some corners there. All right. Now a little bit of flour. You know what? I just remembered I need to make this a lot longer and skinnier, because this is a dough that doesn't get rolled that many times. It really goes, it's like 1, 2, it's like 2.5 rolls really. So I'm gonna really just lengthen this. And I can always cut, if I feel like I've rolled it, I can always cut the dough and do a second roll. I want to just pull one out as a general reference for the thickness. This dough I'm definitely going to trim, so I'm not too worried about like the unevenness on the sides. So the challenge here is getting the dough thin enough without it kind of fighting me, like springing back, and also working quickly enough that it's going to stay cold. I'm going to go ahead and trim the ends. Save these for something else. So now I'm going to brush the surface with a little bit of water. If you've ever done pottery and like made slip out of clay and water and that becomes like your glue, it's kind of the same. All right, so now I'm going to sprinkle it with cinnamon, and I'm going to sprinkle just with my fingertips, and I want the cinnamon to like disperse evenly, so I sprinkle it from like a high above, so that I don't get like big clumps of it basically. I wonder what would happen if I try to brush it. Oh, okay. So now I'm just painting with it. This actually works really well. I think that looks good. Now I'm gonna start rolling it up. I'm not gonna roll it in a circle so much as I'm gonna basically like fold it onto itself to kind of give me that more oblong shape. I feel good about this getting essentially to this size after proofing and frying. But now I wanna be able to make really clean cuts to get that flat, like clean spiral. So this dough has now softened because it's been at room temp. So I'm gonna roll this up. This is why I did this in parchment paper. I'm gonna roll it up inside the parchment, and I'm gonna stick this in the freezer. It's gonna get it really cold and firm, and I'm gonna let it chill before I slice it. Okay, one more. This is bigger. Oh my God, this is so great. I knew this is why you should always hold on to things. This is a peel for making baguette. This is perfect. Let's just slide this onto here. Okay, now into the freezer, and I'm gonna let this sit for probably like 15 minutes, and it's gonna get really cold and firm. So here's my roll. It's actually kind of convenient that the honey buns are oval, because when you're making cinnamon rolls, especially with a soft dough, it almost always flattens anyway. It's like kind of works out. All right, so the dough is nice and firm. Let's unroll it. And I'm gonna start cutting it. A great trick for any kind of a bun or any kind of swirled roll is to cut with, most often you see like an unflavored dental floss. I don't think we have any here. So I'm using, this is like a fishing line. You just need a kind of like what was the word I used? Not like filament, but such some kind of a thin floss. So the idea of doing it this way is that you're not applying downward pressure with a knife. So this helps to cut everything and like maintain the shape. So I'm going to start with just by slicing off the end. So there's not much of a spiral to expose, which in this case I think is good. I'm gonna try to cut them about 1 centimeter wide, which is not very wide. These are gonna proof and they're gonna get bigger. I don't know how much bigger. Did I make them so tiny? They're so little. Oh my God, they're so small. I'm making mini honey buns, whatever. I could cut them a little bit thicker and flatten them more, like with a rolling pin. What do you think about that idea? If I cut them a little bit thicker.
Go with your gut.
And let's try that. And I think this looks better. Comparatively, like, I think this is gonna get too tall and it's so tiny. I'm gonna go with this method. So I'm gonna keep cutting, I'm gonna cut them thicker and I'm gonna basically flatten each one and roll it out. I mean, it's kind of a pleasing shape. So let's go with this idea. And I'm gonna get them all on my sheet tray. You know what I'm just realizing I should have done? I should have put each one on its own piece of parchment. That really facilitates transfer into the oil. You can lift up the entire piece of parchment, like slide it onto a spatula, get it into the oil, and you don't have to even touch the dough. So before these soften too much, I'm gonna cut parchment and get each one on its own little piece. Cover these with some plastic and set them aside to proof. So maybe an hour or so of proofing. The honey buns have puffed nicely. I just gave them a little bit of like a dusting of flour so that the parchment didn't stick as they continue to proof. They need a little bit more time, but they're looking really good. I want to get my fry setup ready because I want to be able to cook these as soon as they're proof so they don't overproof. So I have some oil that's going behind me on like medium low. I just want to see where I am. All right, we're good. We're not getting too hot. I like to do glaze by sight. I don't have like a set proportion for it, but I know what I'm gonna add. I mean, it's gonna be confectioner sugar, milk, honey, and a little bit of butter. I like to add a little bit of fat to my glaze because it tends to like create a little bit of a sheen, and it just like seals everything. It just adds like a little bit of body. I have like a tablespoon and a half of butter here. Oh, ow, ow, ow. What is going on? It made the thing, how is it possible that the dish is this hot and the butter is not melted? I don't really get it. All right, we're gonna let that melt. It is so hot. Some confectioner sugar in my bowl. It always looks like so much sugar, and it is, but it also dissolves really quickly. All right, so then I'm gonna add a splash of milk, a tablespoon or so of honey, a big pinch of salt. Let's add my melted butter. We'll call that about a tablespoon or so of butter. So let's start whisking this. Generally with a confectioner sugar glaze, it's usually better to make it on the thick side, and you can always thin it if needed, but I feel like you think it seems thick and then you have the hot donut and like it tends to run off a bit. So, I mean, this looks really good. I think I could probably thin it a tiny bit. I want to add a little more honey. Maybe another little splash of milk. I'm gonna dunk. The donut is gonna go into the glaze. The glaze is not gonna go over the donut. I'm not gonna do it like factory style. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna add a little vanilla to it also. It's just a nice kind of background flavor. All right, this consistency looks nice. The color is really nice. It's a kind of like soft, creamy beige. I think it's gonna coat the donuts really, really well. It's insanely sweet because it's made of honey and sugar, but it's gonna, I think, be really good on the donuts. You know, I think we're getting close, so I'm going to bring my oil over and crank the heat under it and get it ready for frying, and I'll do like a little sheet tray with a rack, you know, set up for glazing and cooling. Let's see where we are. We were at like 320 a minute or two ago. We're at 330. All right, I'm gonna crank the heat a little. What's so nice about frying on induction is I can control the heat so easily. So I have my glaze here. I have some resting racks for the honey buns when they come off out of the oil. I'm gonna get rid of my plastic here. And I think I'll have room to fry sort of 3 at a time. And they're only gonna take probably a minute or 2 in the oil. So I'm at 3, I wanna get to 350. I'm at 339, 340. So I'm gonna increase this heat a little bit. All right, I'm gonna start by putting the first ones in. So what I like to do when I'm cooking donuts is put them in the oil like upside down, like to basically turn them before putting them in the oil, because what happens is as these are proofing, there's bubbles forming toward the surface. And if I were to put that in the oil, those bubbles get bigger, and then I have like a donut that's denser on one and lighter on the other side, denser on one side, lighter on the other. So I like to put it in the other way first. So I'm gonna slip this into the oil. And I also wanna rotate these really frequently because I don't really wanna I want them to be evenly golden brown all over. So let's see where we are with the oil. So anytime you add something to the oil, it's gonna drop the temp. 345, all right, so I'm right there where I wanna be. It's floating, that's a good sign. It's looking really good. They're definitely gonna be taller than the original. I think frying seems scary, but the thing about doing donuts is that there's not a lot of moisture. So it's like a very gentle, like what's scary about frying is when you put something wet in it and it just pops and like cracks and splatters with oil everywhere. That's terrifying. So here it is. That's kind of the more flat side. That side's a little rounded. They're a little more rounded than the original, but what are you gonna do?
You can really use your hand.
To add it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you have to be careful that you don't drag your fingers through it, but yeah. So I'm gonna do a quick dunk with the first one. So after it's had a minute or 2 to cool, it's still pretty hot. Let's give it a dunk. And I sort of like the more flat surface. So I think that glaze will continue to kind of run off of it. Ow, ow, it's hot, I can't get it out. Ow, 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 ow. Okay, so I'm gonna get to frying the rest. I'm gonna do, I think I can fit 3 in here comfortably without dropping the oil too much and crowding it. And I'm just gonna basically, flip it every maybe 20 or 30 seconds for a total fry time of like 2 or 3 minutes. I think the glaze consistency is just right. So we just need to let this last batch sit for maybe 10 minutes and then we'll come back and taste. Definitely mine are puffier and a little bit larger than the original, but I think it looks like the ideal homemade version of this thing. I think they look amazing. If I were to like picture Honey Bun in my mind, that's what I would picture. The glaze set really nicely. I love the gloss. I think it's like the right coating. I think I overcorrected for like fusing the spiral together, and so mine are a little bit flatter and don't have as much definition of the spiral. There is some. The color is really so similar, don't you think? The size is pretty good from the side profile. Definitely mine is a little puffier. Overall proportions and dimensions, I think it's really, really close. I wish it had more of a honey aroma. I think it could probably be a little bit more pronounced. The proof looks really good. It's super light for its size, just like the original. It has this nice thin golden brown layer, and what I like to see is that there isn't a lot of oil absorption in the interior. Like it didn't overproof, it fried at the proper temperature, so it didn't absorb a lot of oil. So that means it's not gonna be so heavy to eat. Let me smell the interior. The interior smells really good. Once you break it open, you get some of the cinnamon scent. It smells really good. I really love donuts. These are so good. The honey flavor is subtle. I feel like there could be more in the glaze. The cinnamon is subtle. I'm probably gonna put more of the cinnamon, but it is also just like a phenomenally delicious donut. And I ate it where like the glaze like hit my tongue first, and so you get like a little bit of sweetness, but the actual donut itself is so not too sweet. Feels very similar as far as size to weight, but really it's texture. It's just like they're so light and pillowy, and it has a little bit of that like bready pull apart texture, but still really tender. This was a really fun one. I liked that I got to basically do like one process, which is like making donuts and not having to like make a whole bunch of different components. It wasn't so many different ingredients. It was really fun and satisfying, and I definitely nailed it. So I like getting an easy one every now and then. It's not even late in the afternoon. So I get to go have a little coffee and enjoy my donut. So very successful. And we promise, we will circle back and bring you part 2 of a certain episode. We've been dragging our feet a little bit, admittedly. But if you want to see any other subjects for Claire Recreates, let us know in the comments. International, domestic, we're open to anything. And I hope you enjoyed watching. If you liked this, check out other episodes. Maybe hit that subscribe button. It's up to you. All right, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.